for work. And he was like, okay, are you going to be okay? And I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to be here when you get back. And I wasn't joking or being dramatic. I really didn't know how I was going to survive the next hours, the next 8 hours with what was going on in my head.
Episode of the Amlia podcast. My name is Josh, and we're happy that you're joining us for another installment of our mental health series. Hey, we want to do this again because we believe that mental health is a very important topic, especially in these times that we're live. When things seem really dark and depressing, it's easy to get depressed and anxiety over it. I know I have succumbed to that a time or two in the past few weeks. But knowing where to go to, who to go to, for that comfort and just that peace. And for those of us who are Christians and believers, we know where, we know in Christ that that's where that comes from. And, just want to encourage everybody to, you know, keep on to, Jesus, because, he's the way, he is truth. Then I'm going to go ahead and bring my wife in here. Hey,
Hello.
Rebecca, how's it going?
Doing all right.
All right. And for those of you who don't know, Rebecca is a master embroiderist.
False. Do not give them. No, don't tell them untrue things. Not a master embroiderer. I like to embroider, but
and you did embroidery quite a few years, not a few years, several months ago. I think it was about a year ago when you did your first project. That you're getting back into it again. You find it relaxing. You like it.
I do. Yeah, I like it. It's I'd like for it to be, there's a lot of people who are like, yes, I use embroidery or whatever little crafty project they're doing as my prayer time. I would love for that to be true for me, but it's hard for whatever reason. My mind goes completely blank and I just have to either listen to music or an audiobook or something. It's like I'm so focused on getting all the stitching right. But yeah.
Awesome. Well, we have a guest with us again this week, and she is a life coach. But not only that, she is our second international guest. If you remember from last year when we did this series, we had a guest in Israel, but this way we have one all the way from Greece. So we're going to bring Deb in. Hey, Deb.
Hi, everybody. So good to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being on the show. We're happy to meet
you. My pleasure.
So Deb, you and I had talked a little bit before, maybe about a month ago, about your story, and I was just really intrigued by it, and I found it really interesting. But we want to have our guests get to know you a little bit. So we have some questions here. So Rebecca, go ahead and proceed with the interview.
Yeah. So, I mean, the first thing I'm really curious about is the story that you told Josh, because I wasn't involved in that initial conversation. So, tell us a little bit about your story.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. Well, I'm from Ottawa, Canada, so not related to Greece at all. But I was studying at Carleton University in Ottawa. I was studying for a Bachelor of Commerce, which is a business degree, and I was really interested in international business. So I had this amazing opportunity in my third year to go on a student exchange to England, and I met and I'm also like quite an adventurous person. Like it seemed quite right for me to go and do something like that. So I met I didn't know it at the time, the man who would become my husband, who was from Greece, and we finished our studies and all that stuff. And we never intended on settling in Greece. We actually were thinking of either England or Canada, but he had to go to Greece to do his military service. It was a mandatory 18 months then, and now it's, I think, 9 or 12, I'm not sure. And so we came to Greece. And I thought, okay, for a year and a half, why not? And then I ended up getting a pretty good job, which surprised me. It was an English speaking company, so that's what was sort of I was lucky about. And I was like, when he finished his military service, I said, why don't we just stay for settle down? We've been studying and all that. Let's settle down for a few years. Never expected to stay here, and 28 years later, I'm still here in Athens.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, so you're in Athens then.
Yes. Yeah.
City, right?
Pardon?
Big city.
It is a big city. Yeah. it's sort of scary, like when you're not. I remember I lived in his town for the first 2 years that we were in Greece, and whenever I would see Athens on the news, I was like, "Oh my God, that place is horrible and scary." But when you live here, you just sort of like stay within your surroundings, like in your like suburb and stuff. It's really, really nice. I think that you can make a home for yourself if you make up your mind to make a home for yourself. You can do it. So it
That's
was
awesome.
good.
So
Yeah.
I obviously there's a lot of like ancient history that's there. Is there a
Yes.
mixture of the ancient and like ultra modern, or is it kind of like in between with like architecture and everything like
Yeah.
that?
Such a good question. I would say it's a mixture. It's in between. It's both. Like it's crazy that I was stopped at a red light the other day and I looked up and I'm like, oh, that's the Parthenon. And it's like,
No big
how
deal.
often? Yeah, and then you're like, it's just there. It's weird, but it's beautiful. And I take the metro to work every day. The metro, I think, was built the subway about 20 years ago. And I remember it took years and years for them to build it because they kept digging and running into all these precious ruins and findings and stuff like that. So they did the amazing thing. Like if you guys, I don't know if you've been to Athens, but you have to like ride the metro. They left everything intact and just sort of put everything behind glass. So when you go down into the metro station, you can see like the things that they dug up, the walls, the stone and stuff like that. It's like going to a museum every time you ride the subway.
Yeah, that is
Yeah.
so fascinating.
Yeah.
That I mean, it makes sense because from what I've heard, there's a lot of cities like that. I think in the Greece area, but in just like in the Mediterranean in general,
Yeah.
where it's like layer upon layer
Yeah.
of city. Like
Yeah.
I'm thinking specifically of Herculaneum
Okay.
in the area that was covered up by Vesuvius when it erupted. And so
Okay.
there's like a whole layer. And then they built a whole
Yeah.
other city on top of it.
I know.
So it's like crazy.
It is.
Of course that's in Italy.
Yeah.
But
But it's same idea.
yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's just fascinating. I love ancient history. It's so interesting
Oh.
to me.
Well, you're
But
officially invited
oh,
to come and
wonderful.
stay. Yeah,
I'll come
you
and
have a
visit.
home. Yeah, yeah, yeah. For sure. Yeah, it's beautiful. And then the second part was, is there also modern? Yes, absolutely. The nice thing though is that they're not, I can't remember how many floors it is, but they're not allowed to build more than something like 6 floors in Athens, which is so, I mean, it's life changing just knowing that you can walk out on your balcony and breathe a little bit because there are like 4 million people in this very small area and it's actually surrounded by mountains or hills, I guess. So that's why there's a lot of smog and stuff. So just imagine like skyscrapers and whatnot blocking your view of the Parthenon or the sea. It just keeps it a little bit more. I can't think of the word, but sort of in its original state, let's say.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, that reminds me of London for a long, 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 long
Yeah.
time. There was this mandate that nothing could be higher than St. Paul's Cathedral.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
then, of course, now that's changed, and we've got the Shard and
Right.
some of those other buildings in that area. The one that looks like the Bullet, I forget what that building's called, but
Yeah.
um, yeah. So I love that though. That was one of
I
my
know.
favorite parts. So
Yeah.
people who listen to the show know that I spent a lot of time in England as well,
Right.
and I actually got my master's degree there in art history
Wow.
and visual culture. So,
Wow.
yeah, super fun experience. It was
Yeah.
incredible.
You're
But
adventurous like I am.
yes, yes. Oh my, yeah. I left everything here in the
Yep.
United States and went to England to live on my own for a year. I ended up
Wow.
staying in a hostel with that was run by Spanish nuns.
Oh,
And it was like an all girls hostel. And
wow.
yeah, it was an experience. That's for
Oh my
sure. Um,
yeah.
but
Uh,
so much fun.
yeah. Anything that sort of scares you and excites you at the same time, I think is worth it. That's
Yeah.
Yeah, most
sort of
definitely.
yeah, yeah. For
Mhm.
sure. Oh, amazing.
Mhm.
Yeah, so it's good. Like I said before, that I went through times where I was very down, absolutely depressed, just completely desperate. And I thought, for whatever reason, right now you're here. So you need to make your life here. Whatever, if you decide to leave and go back to Canada in a year, 5 years, 10 years, whatever, that's fine. But right now, the only one who's suffering is you
Yeah.
because you're not um just making the decision to own this, So it's been a very broadening experience for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. How long did it take you to really learn the language and get familiar with the culture?
Um, I think I had done a few lessons in Canada. I did something really smart when I was in England, and I was waiting for my husband to finish his degree, and I had finished mine. I did a Greek translation course, so it wasn't so much speaking, but it was actually learning the grammar and alphabet and whatnot. So I got like structurally, I got a really good understanding of it. And then when I moved here, um, I would say that I was stringing sentences together sort of like within 6 months. And then I was just very adamant about I just people would try to speak English with me, which was super polite of them, to try to accommodate me. But I was like, well, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to speak Greek because I was really adamant about learning it. So I really can't remember. It's been quite a while, but I would say that I was functional within 1 to 2 years, I
Yeah.
guess. Yeah,
That's awesome. It would definitely help, I would imagine, being immersed in the language and the culture, like
absolutely. It's the
100%.
only way. I really think it's the only way. Like, for instance, in Canada, that French is also an official language, just like English. So we all learn French. I can't, even though my French was quite good at some point, because I have no immersion whatsoever in French, it's like, I don't know a word. Now, when I do go back to Canada and I'm staying in Quebec with my sister, it starts to come back. Like, I don't think you ever lose it. But if you're not practicing it, like you said, if you're not immersed, if you're not getting uncomfortable,
Yeah.
um, making mistakes. That was the other thing. I was just making all these mistakes, and I just felt so stupid. And I was like, nobody is judging you. If anything, they're saying, look at this girl who could just be like, oh, everybody, please speak English for me. They appreciated me trying, stumbling and trying to accommodate them. So it was again, a self-limiting thing. Um, but yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, you have to make your mistakes to get through to the other
Yeah.
side.
Absolutely. I love what you said. I don't think it ever really goes away. It's like
Yeah.
locked somewhere deep into your
Yeah.
memory. I
Yes.
remember, so one of the girls that was staying at the hostel, most of the girls were Spanish. So I went to go visit her in Spain. She was in
Oh.
Bilbao.
Mm.
And so I went over to Bilbao to chat with her, and of course, all of her friends. We went out to. They have a crazy life. Oh my
Oh,
gosh, the
yeah. I'm
Spanish!
sure.
Wow, they're like
Yeah.
every night. They probably
I
not every night, but like they're up until like
Yep.
4 a.m. and then they
Yeah.
go out and go to work at like 9. And you're like,
Yeah.
how?
I know,
Anyway,
and they don't even go out until, like, 11 o'clock at night.
yeah,
I'm
I
like,
know.
I am in, like, stage 3 sleep by 11 o'clock clock at
Yeah,
night. They're
right,
just going out.
exactly. Exactly. But I
Yeah.
remember going out and like meeting some of her friends, and they were so nice to, like you said,
Yeah.
accommodate with
Yeah.
trying to speak English. And when they wouldn't understand something, I was like, oh my gosh, I took Spanish in school, and I was
Yeah.
like, how can I say this? How can I say this? And then like words would just pop out, and I was like,
Yes.
I didn't know I remembered that. It's been so long. So yeah, I think it's all
Yeah.
kind of locked away in there.
Totally. I just dormant and just ready to be, like, excited out of its dormancy, let's say.
Yes.
Yeah, our minds are amazing things for
They
sure.
are. They are.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
speaking of minds and dealing with all of this stress, how did you get into life coaching?
Wow. Okay. So as I said before, I studied business. So I was like not like nothing related to like psychology or anything. And it's just from my personal experience. So, um, I was diagnosed at 30 with depression, OCD, and anxiety. But in speaking to my psychiatrist, I realized that I had been suffering my entire life. Um, so my entire life has been a series of trying to find ways to feel better. I've tried everything, and I can, tell you all the different things that I've tried. And I think that when I started to feel a little bit better psychologically, I vividly remember, and this was years ago, thinking, if I can help even one person feel better in this world, it will have been worth it. I need somebody else to, like, I'm getting teary, I need somebody else to feel that relief of, okay, okay, there is hope. So that, I guess, maybe planted the seed of wanting to help people. I'm working I'm still work full time, at a business, but this is just something I've been doing in parallel. And then I had to work so much on myself. I did yoga. I ended up teaching yoga. I've done so many courses, like seminars on, spirituality, on psychology. So I think that I started like sort of coaching my friends, but not really meaning to. And, some people just kept saying, wow, you give such good advice and you're so intuitive. And I don't think I have any sort of special gift. I just think that because of my own suffering, I was so forced to get in tune with any sort of healing method I could. It just coaching sort of started to come naturally. And then after I've separated from my husband, but we have a fantastic relationship now. We have the relationship now that we could never have when we were married, so it's great. I just got this real burst of like, I want to do everything. I'm going to take a life coaching course. I had this burst of energy. So I just think that life coaching came from a place of really wanting to help people wake up a little bit, know that they've got a cheering section. There's somebody there to cheer them on. And, but it came very organically. Like it was sort of my own process over the last 20 years, let's say.
Wow. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
awesome. I think anyone that goes into counseling and life coaching and even like social
Yeah.
work and stuff,
Yeah.
it's from a place of caring, of
Yes.
wanting to help, and a lot of
Yes.
the times it's
Yeah.
because we ourselves have suffered from
Exactly.
some sort of mental health, either episode or
Yeah.
period of our life, or it's a chronic disorder or illness or whatever it
Yeah.
is. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and yeah, I think our own experience definitely play a big part. Yeah, I'm actually just about to start school to become a licensed professional counselor.
I
Um,
heard one of your episodes
yeah.
or a couple of, yeah, that's amazing. I was like, yay. That's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah, so I totally get it,
Yeah.
um it's such a burden to want to help people. So and we need
It
people like that,
is.
obviously. Help each other. Let's all get stronger together.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I was thinking, Josh was saying in the beginning how sort of the state of the world is overwhelming and it's hard to find hope. And of course, that's all true. And I think the only way that I can handle that mentally, because I do get upset about the state of so many things in the world and it's overwhelming and you feel like, what's the point? Why am I even here? Um, the only way that I can get myself around that mentally is like look at it as an individual. Do what you can do on an individual basis. If you can help one, five, 10 people, that will have a ripple effect. That'll have a generational effect. Like what kind of legacy are you leaving? It's like say, when people say, well, why bother voting? One
Yeah,
vote, big deal. No,
it
if you
makes
can
a
touch,
difference.
it really does. And I'm not so concerned with voting, but I am concerned with, you never know the way that you touch someone, the way that you smile at a person, the way that you listen to a person, or even if you've had the what's it called, the privilege of counseling somebody, you never know what kind of ripple effect that's going to be. And for the most of us, there are some people who do save the world and who can make a huge impact. But for most of us who might not be able to do that, the impact that we're making on our community and our friends is something we shouldn't, underestimate that. I think I wanted to say something else, but I totally forgot what it was. I do that.
No, no worries. Yeah, Deb, you're right. I mean, we've seen countless things throughout history. The ripple effect. I mean, probably
Yeah.
the most obvious one, is uh, the uh, during like Christ's ministry, like he taught 12 people, and that has now grown to multitudes throughout generations.
Yeah.
Um,
Exactly.
Martin Luther, Martin Luther King Jr.
Mhm.
Again, two, I wasn't
Both of them.
misspeaking. Both of
Yeah.
them, two
Yeah, both of them, yeah.
separate people.
Yes.
But yeah, just from those different aspects. So you're right. I mean, uh, when we see um, chaos, dismay, and then people are like, well, I guess I'll just cross my arms and I'm just gonna sit,
Mm,
you know, you
yeah,
know, I'm just gonna wait here. Laurel St. is ready. No, no,
yeah,
this is not a time to sit on your hands. This is a time to go out there and make an impact. For
exactly.
us who are the leaders, that's making disciples.
Mhm.
For other people, it may just be doing good in the world, environmentalism, whatever it might be. But
Exactly.
just don't sit back and like, well. I guess this is
Yeah.
just how it's gonna be.
Yeah, it
Absolutely.
reminds me of a, the book I'm reading right now. It's called
Yeah.
Chasing Shadows, and it's about
Okay.
World War
Oh
II.
yeah.
Yeah,
Oh.
about World War II, and this family in um, the Netherlands,
Mm.
and they a lot happens, but they they all have to ultimately make a choice during that time period in the story, and actually in real life,
Mhm.
everyone kind of had to make a choice in Nazi occupied Europe.
Mhm.
um, do we fight back? Is it
Mm.
how can we even make a difference? And there's characters in the story that are just like, well, we can't make a difference, so I'm
No.
going to protect my life
Yeah.
and do what I need to do, and let's not rock the boat here. There's nothing we can do anyway. And then other
Mm.
characters who are like, we have to do something. I have to protect my Jewish friends,
Yes.
and we got to hide them away somewhere, even if it costs me my life, like that's
Yep.
important.
Mhm.
And I remember one of the characters was a pastor, and he was talking about the story of Hezekiah
Mhm.
when the Israel was experiencing um, whoever it was that
Mhm.
was coming against Israel at the time. And they
Yeah.
were like, "Hey, come on out. We'll be nice to you.
Mm.
Come join our forces." And Hezekiah
Mhm.
was like, "No, we are standing on the Lord, and we're
Yeah.
not budging."
Yep.
And so it's like basically the whole conversation is, how do you make a
Oh.
stand? How do you make a difference?
Yep.
And it's one person at a time. Can you hide that
Yep.
one family?
Yep.
Can you give them something to eat, even if it's going to
Yes.
take away from something that you eat? And
Yes.
that's how we make a difference. It's one by one. What can you do in this moment at this time? And yeah, they weren't the army forces coming in
Nope.
and destroying
Nope.
the Nazis,
No.
but
No.
that made a profound difference on individual lives during the war. And yeah,
Absolutely.
so we can do that
Absolutely.
today.
We absolutely can, and it was so much of what both of you said. Brought up all these different things I want to say, but I think that, for instance, a family making the decision, should we help this Jewish family? I'm sure they were terrified, but
Yeah.
I'm really finding in my own personal life, the scarier I find something, the more I'm pretty sure I have to do it. It's like, living outside my comfort zone, because I lived for so many years inside my comfort zone where I was one of those people who was just sort of letting life pass me by and not being in the driver's seat. Every time I get nervous about it, I mean, I've had a few things, lately that I've just been sick to my stomach, worried about, and I've just done them. And not only have I done them, but I have done them amazingly. And it's like the magic happens outside your comfort zone. I'm sure you've heard that before. I'm not encouraging people to go out and do reckless things, but yeah, I think that you understand though. What I'm saying
Yes.
is that, yeah. Um, but this is something else that, since you asked about life coaching as well, as I said, I'm not a psychologist or anything like that. What I really found with myself, and now that I've found it with myself, I can see it in so many other people. I was riding what I call the life train. What I call, you're born, you go to school, you study something, you get a job, you get married, you have kids, you retire, and you die. Like that's sort of the formula. And I find that a lot of people, and myself included, are just riding that train without really thinking, okay, well, where do I fit into this? What's my special gift? I mean, we all have to do those things. We have to work, we,
Yeah.
procreate and all that stuff. I'm not dissing that at all. It's my story too, but it's like also about wake up. We weren't put on this earth to be robots and to just, feed into an economy. We are here. We are spirits. We are part of the communal spirit. We're sparks of light and energy. How am I making my mark on this world? What legacy am I leaving? And again, it doesn't have to be, world changing stuff, but am I driving my life, or am I letting life drive me? And
Mhm.
I think that for coaching, that's what I try to do. I try to get an assessment with my clients of where they are now, where they'd like to be in the various areas of their life. And I try to, like, my company is actually called Leap. Leap. It could be Leap of Faith. It's it's good, live, evolve, achieve, prosper. I want people to move forward, but centering what they feel their purpose is. Even if it's a teeny tiny purpose, we've all got a purpose.
Yeah.
Hope that makes sense.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, most definitely.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, good.
Absolutely. Well, and I've noticed too, you've definitely got like a podcast sort of set up like we
Yeah.
do here.
Yeah,
So and you've got a podcast that
I do.
kind of goes along with Leap, that's
Yeah,
titled "The Day We Laugh and
we
We Learned."
that's right.
So, what do you talk about on your podcast?
Oh my God, everything. So it just, which is, I wish we had a niche because it would be so much easier to market. But my friend and I have a great friend. She's American. She lives in Greece though. And we would just talk about these things. There were so many things about the world that we wanted to learn. And I don't know if it was, life sort of passing us by, raising our kids, that we just never had the time to sit down and learn stuff. And I said, you know what? Why don't we like once a week try to learn something new? It could be anything, current events, history, whatever, and check in with each other so that we're held accountable to each other to actually learn something. She said, well, why don't we turn that into a podcast? And it was really as simple as that. So we each week we surprise each other. We take turns researching a topic, and we surprise each other with our topic. It can be anything, and because it's a surprise, it ends up being like a really candid and usually really funny conversation, because we think that for us at least, it's much easier to learn something if it's in like a funny context, as opposed to just listening to something, like, I don't know, somebody rambling on about a topic. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. We have touched a little bit on mental health, not a whole lot, but it's definitely a welcome topic for me always.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really cool. I love that.
Yeah.
Yes,
So
thank
many
you.
podcasts that people start, I think, are we want a structured way to have conversations
Right.
about things that we want to learn.
Exactly. Yes.
And I think that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Absolutely. And I think that I think again it gets back to this sharing. It's like if I'm gonna, just make a podcast out of me having a drink with my friend or a coffee with my friend, maybe other people would benefit from what we have to talk about, from our experiences, what we're going through. I do think that people want to share. I think that it's our nature to be in community. I don't
Oh,
know if it's like from animals traveling in packs, like I do think that that's our nature. And it seems to be coming out with these sort of this new wave of like podcasts and self-development and all that stuff.
yeah, absolutely. I
Yeah.
definitely think we are relational beings.
Yes,
We
thank you.
um
Yeah,
yeah,
that's the word
absolutely.
I was thinking of.
Yeah,
Thank
we're
you.
meant to live in community
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
and share those experiences and build each other up. And
Yeah.
as Christians, we believe that God is a triune God. He is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Hmm.
And he is relational within himself, which is
Right.
all kinds of complicated. We won't get into
Right.
that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
created us in his image. So of course we're going to be relational.
Yeah.
It just makes sense to me.
Exactly. And it's like there's so many people feel alone, but there's really a wealth of support out there.
Yeah.
And I'm not criticizing me. I know why a lot of people feel alone. I absolutely
Yeah.
get that. But there's just really, when you think about it, you just extend your arm and there's a person there who's feeling at least one of the feelings you're feeling.
Oh,
Whether they want to
absolutely.
talk about, yeah, and that was for me. I don't know if we want to dive into this, but that was the absolute worst thing for me growing up, because I didn't know what I had. I didn't know I had depression. I was
Mm,
just, I was it's such a paradox, because I was one of the smiliest, funniest people, but also the saddest. And we actually did an episode on the relationship between comedy and depression. And of
yeah.
course, comedy and humor are defense mechanisms, survival tactics. But I always felt bad. I always felt bad about something. I always felt guilty about something. I was always worried about something. And I just thought, firstly, I can't even explain how I feel to another human, let alone expect them to understand. And it was also, I think I'm a bit older than you guys. I was born in 1970, so I was a teenager in the 80s. The 80s was like a flashy new money. Everybody was happy on the outside, or at least appeared to be. Nobody wanted to talk about relation or emotions and depression. So, even my parents, who are the most, I adore them. They're the most lovely people. They didn't know how to cope with questions about mental health. And I absolutely don't blame them for that. It wasn't in the culture. It wasn't ever taught to them. So that's why it's just, I know that it's been said and said and said, but somebody will understand you. There is nothing, I don't know if, any of our listeners can, relate to this, but there's nothing you can tell somebody that they haven't heard before, especially like a healthcare, a mental health expert. I remember
For sure.
describing, sorry, what'd you say?
I was just saying, for sure. Yeah,
For
they
sure. Yeah.
hear, I mean, even in their training, they're going to hear all kinds of
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're literally trained to go, okay, well, let's talk about that, and let's move forward.
Exactly.
And it's going to be okay. You're going to be met with compassion
Yes.
and empathy.
Absolutely. I remember when I was diagnosed with OCD. OCD, I'm sure you're familiar with. I did the rituals, like I would pray, like what's it called? You do like a behavioral ritual based on like this obsessive thought, right? So every time I had a negative thought, I would pray like 50 times in a row, or I would knock on my head, or I would knock on wood. And those I could almost deal with. But another part that I didn't know was OCD was that I always had this feeling that I had done something bad. I always felt like or that I would do something bad, that I would hurt somebody. I didn't know that was OCD. I thought I was just a bad person, a crazy person that wanted to hurt people, which
Yeah.
of course I didn't. And when I told my psychiatrist about that, he said, "Oh, that's OCD." And he completely deflated this huge, horrible image. I was like, "You mean there's a name for this? Other people have this? I'm not crazy, or at least what I have is treatable." Like I can't, I never worried about OCD again, just from that one response from him that, yeah, that's one of the symptoms. I was like, oh my God, I just thought I was a horrible, horrible person waiting to explode. So it just goes to show that somebody out there will understand you. And if the
Yeah.
first person doesn't, go to the next person. If the next person doesn't, go to the next person. Don't give up. Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing to me, and particularly mental illness and mental and physical things in general,
Yeah.
giving something a name, like,
Yes.
uses its power in a way.
Yes.
It's
It,
amazing.
you are so right. It makes it manageable.
Yeah.
It's
You're
like
like,
it's something.
"Oh, it's not this, like, unknown weird
Yeah.
thing that I do or think or whatever." Yeah.
Exactly. I've often thought that about getting diagnoses. Nobody wants to get a diagnosis for anything, but at least, like my daughter actually, she was doing, when she was about, she's 15 now, but when she was about 5, she started just like losing contact. Like her head would just sort of be in the clouds, or she would be staring, but she was not staring at anything. And I was like, oh my God, what is going on? Is she hearing voices? Is she, I don't know. I had no idea. And then we went to a neurologist, and she finally, after a few months of trying to figure it out, was diagnosed with childhood absence syndrome, which is a form of epilepsy. And I was like, thank you. But I'm not happy that she has something, but I'm happy that
Right.
at least it has a name. I can look it up. I can know what we have to do. There's medication for it. It absolutely made it more manageable. So yeah, luckily it was, I'm not sure if any of your listeners, have struggled with this, but luckily it was a form of epilepsy that normally and did goes away at puberty. So thankfully
Oh, good.
she's been, yeah, seizure free
Yeah.
for well,
Fantastic.
I don't know, 3 years or something. Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's crazy that things can be present in, like, childhood and then
I
Yeah.
go through
know.
puberty and things just change. What was it? It was like a hormone imbalance? Like, what is going
Honestly,
on? That's
I
so strange.
something about how
Yeah.
the brain develops. Like, I guess that
Mm.
I'm not sure. I'm not an expert. People should look it up. But yeah, it's called childhood absence syndrome, and it's literally like if you just pulled your plug on your computer,
Yeah.
they just stop. And the doctors would say to me, when she does that, pinch her. I'm not going to pinch my daughter. Like, no, pinch her. She didn't. Nothing. She had zero. contact with reality in those few seconds. Yep. But the thing is that they can do them like 100 times a day. So, they miss school and yeah. But so if anybody's listening and they, have a child with that, there is tons of hope. She ended up, she got on the right medication and um, she sailed through it, thankfully.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
So, since we're talking about self-care, or since we're talking
Mm.
about mental health,
Yeah.
tell us about self-care. Like, what are some of your self-care practices? Also, before we get into that, I
Hmm.
just gotta say, I don't know if I said this whenever we recorded something last time. I'll say it again, but I've been thinking about it a lot recently. For
Yeah.
whatever reason, there's this stigma against self-care and it being selfish and it being
Oh,
so time consuming and it being
oh,
whatever. And I finally, for whatever reason, it clicked with me
oh,
earlier this week or last week, whichever one. And um it was like, no, it's literally taking care of yourself. It's brushing your teeth and taking a shower,
Mhm.
going on a walk
oh
and
my
getting some sunlight.
God.
And like that's what it is. And I was like, oh, breakthrough. I don't know why. It just,
I'm
yeah.
so glad you had that breakthrough.
Yeah.
That realization was life-changing for me.
Mhm.
Um, I I did a coaching course as a coachee around the time that I was separating, and so it made me realize. No, actually, I'm going to start with a different story. My worst bout of depression. I just want to say that when I was diagnosed at 30, it took me, I think, about 2 years to make the decision to go on medication because I was, and I think a lot of people struggle with that. I'll get addicted. I'll do this. I'll do that. And of course, everybody has to make their own decision. I finally made the decision that it's either I die because I can't live like this, or I take a pill that might have some side effects. For me, I ended up taking it, but it did take me about 2 years to make that decision. Um, I ended up, feeling much better. But again, another thing is that these, antidepressants, they don't make you euphoric. You still have to do the work. All they do is bring you up to the level of sort of the average person, right?
Yeah.
So, I went off my meds when I got pregnant and I had my beautiful daughter. And of course, I had horrible, horrible postpartum depression. It was wasn't the first time, but it was the time that really sticks in my memory when I really, really thought I was going to kill myself. I just didn't know. I couldn't imagine. Like, I remember one morning my husband was leaving for work and he was like, okay, are you going to be okay? And I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to be here when you get back. And I wasn't joking or being dramatic. I really didn't know how I was going to survive the next hours, the next 8 hours with what was going on in my head. And I want to say too, sorry, I think you asked me something and I'm totally off track. I'm just trying to like get as much information out there as possible. I'm smart, I'm educated, I'm, I don't know, decent looking, good background. The thing is that, depression has nothing to do with how capable you are
Yep.
as a person. It does not discriminate. It
Yeah.
doesn't discriminate. So it's not, because a lot of people, I think, were like, snap out of it, or, come on, you got everything going for you. How it's like, you really think I made the choice to feel this way? Um, so that's something that's really important. Depression is, it comes upon you. It's not something you did to deserve, let's say. So sorry. So I wanted to say that, um, when I went through that horrible bout of depression after I had my daughter, I realized that if I'm not okay, nobody's okay. If I'm not healthy and functioning, my daughter is not going to be cared for. My husband's not going to be cared for. I felt like I was or not I felt, I was definitely like the heart of the family. I was literally giving life to my daughter by breastfeeding her, so I thought, if I don't take care of myself, if I don't center myself, if I don't do what you were just saying people call selfish, if I don't leave my daughter for an hour to go for a walk or to go to the gym, which people say, wow, you got a newborn at home. How can you just leave her? If I don't go and do that and feel like I can function properly, everyone's going to suffer. So I think it's actually selfless in a way, you know so I think that I learned, that was sort of where I was when I gave birth. I went back on medication, ended up, doing pretty well. And then when I was going through my separation, again, I was just in a really dark place. And I started doing self-care, like standing boundaries I had never thought before of implementing, like, you know what? That can wait. I'm going for a coffee by myself. Or I need to sleep now. Or I need to wash my hair now. Or I need a half an hour to, I don't know, walk around the block. I absolutely got called selfish. I also ended up sort of not really pursuing some friendships that I had made because I didn't feel like they were good for me. I got called selfish for that too.
Mm.
And the thing is that if you're not taking care of yourself, how can you be a vessel for anybody else? And also, why not take care of myself? Why not love myself? Why? Where is it written that I can't love myself? And think that, like, how am I supposed to overcome my mental health issues if I don't even think I'm worth overcoming them? It's like, for me, I don't know. I think, like you said, you had this realization. Maybe that's the way it has to happen, like as a realization. But honestly, prioritizing myself has made me a better person, as
Absolutely.
paradoxical as it sounds.
Yeah, it makes me think of the Bible verse where Jesus is talking, wherein he says, "Love your neighbor as yourself."
There
And
you
so
go. Yeah.
often we say it's like, yes, love your neighbor, and that's the
Yeah.
part we focus on, which is absolutely true. But in order
Yes.
to love your neighbor, you do have to love yourself. You have to take care of yourself and be the best version of
Absolutely.
you so that you can take care of your neighbor. And that's the most
Absolutely.
healthiest.
Absolutely. And I think that, we're often people are mirrors. Like you could, like you can, if you're taking care of yourself, and you might inspire somebody. You might
Absolutely.
you just you never know. I think we do have to lead by example, without that meaning that, I mean, I definitely have my very difficult days.
Oh,
Mental health is always there. It's just that I now have much better tools to cope with it, and I'm better at asking for help and all that stuff. But yes, absolutely.
it's a journey. It's a long journey
Yeah.
to get to where, you are. So, yeah.
I don't think it ever ends. I think
Yeah,
that,
and it doesn't.
I don't want to. That's something else I was thinking about saying today, if I have the chance, is that there's no quick fix. Um,
Yeah.
I think I was looking for quick fixes. I was like, oh, if only I read this book that they've recommended, I'll feel better. If I
Yeah.
take this vitamin, if I, get fit, all of those things are amazing. All of those things help, but they just build. You're just building. You're constantly building and building and building. Um, there's like, if you think, like, I remember I would think, oh, I was feeling so great. Why am I having this, down day today? I guess everything I did didn't work. No, we're dynamic beings. We change, our circumstances change, our moods change, our hormones change, everything changes. I don't think anything we do is a waste. I just think we have to keep investing in ourselves, and there's just no magical day. I'm not saying you're never going to have good days. I have way more good days than bad days, thank God now. But you know, you just you you just have to keep prioritizing your mental health, and doing whatever it takes to just keep getting better.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
100% agree on that. Well, Dad, I mean, that you've offered some great insight already,
Mhm.
and
Particularly into the topic that we'll be talking
yeah,
about today.
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great lead in.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about as a whole overall. We're going to be talking about an anime series which is actually inspired by a manga, or based off a manga, and that is called Orange. So to give you, for those of you who have not seen this, just to give you the synopsis, kind of revolves in part around a teenage girl named Naho, who one day she receives a letter from her future self detailing action she must take to prevent a boy named Kakeru from basically his demise. So getting all these instructions, these events of what she must prevent in order to save this guy's life. And this comes in a culmination of the friendship group, Um, this anime is about 13 episodes, so for those of you who are bingers, you can definitely binge this on a weekend. Um, it has a good blend of, lightheartedness, but also serious. So, Deb, first of all, thank you for indulging us in watching this. What were your thoughts? Like, what spoke to you about this series?
Oh gosh, where to start? I guess the first thing that hit me was that I have a teenage daughter, like I said before, and I saw this group. Firstly, thank you for recommending it. I would never have found it on my own, so it was just an absolute pleasure to watch it. Um, I just thought about myself as a teenager struggling with my mental health and teenagers now, how um how much is being said and not listened to. Like I think that there are so many signs that, kids are struggling and they're not sort of expressing themselves or people aren't picking up on it. I just feel like teenagers are sort of painted with the brush of, oh, come on, it's just hormones. Oh, it's just a phase. Oh, he's a teenager, a bad attitude and all that. N- Absolutely. I mean, that's part of it. But
Yeah.
teenagers are real people and they are dealing with real, like the things that my daughter tells me, I am blown away. I mean, just today she was telling me about a girl who passed away from a heart attack, 15-year-old girl living in our area, likely due to drugs and alcohol. Now, we don't know if she took them, if they were put in her drink. These are things we have to be listening. Our kids are in this world. We're in this world. So I just felt um, that it was such an important series to watch regarding particularly teenage mental health because it is a very real thing. And I just think that the channels of communication with family and friends should be open. And I also felt that it's such the group trying to help Cockadoo, they're just kids themselves, right? So I just felt like teenagers were, very much on their own trying to navigate all these very scary things. So, yeah, that was the first thing that hit me. Hope that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Now when we rewatched this, well, not fully. We had watched it previously, like a few years ago. Apparently, Becca, it was a haze to her.
I
Um,
don't remember it at all. Even
That's
trying
me.
to
I won't
tell me,
yeah.
oh man, I was like,
I'm the same.
I really don't remember this. I wonder if it's because we watched it so fast because it is a shorter
Yeah.
anime, so it was like a weekend binger kind of a
Yeah.
thing. So I'm wondering if we did that and it was like, wow, that was good, move on. And it
yeah,
just
Yeah.
didn't stick in my brain for
right.
some reason. I don't know.
That happens to me all the time. Don't worry about it. I'm just
Yeah.
going to turn on a
So,
light. I'm so sorry if this is
oh no, yeah, no
You're
problem.
good.
okay. All right. I'm
Yeah,
back.
no worries. Awesome. Yeah, so basically the crash course over the last few days. Started with the first three, skip down to episode 6, then episode 10, and then of course episode 13 being the last one. Um, yeah, so let's focus on before we get to Kakeru, let's focus on the character of Naho, because
Mm,
she is imposing a lot of things on herself and throughout the
yeah.
series, it appears until we get to like episode 6,
Mhm.
that she's just putting so much pressure on herself in
Mhm.
order to carry out this mission from their future self to
Yeah.
prevent Kakadu's death.
Mhm.
Um, Again, we see her, even her other friends, like sewing buttons and
Yes.
making Kakadu's lunch
Mhm.
and imposing like, well, I have to do this because my future self told me. Also, I want to keep this friendship group. If I don't do these things,
Mhm.
then that just dissipates. And I think that goes along with what you were saying earlier about kind of this OCD disorder. Like, I'm thinking these thoughts, and if I don't have like rituals or tasks that I do, then everything, falls apart.
Yeah. I found Naho actually painful to watch at first, but I realized that
I will say that's a sentiment from other commenters on
okay.
yeah.
Yeah, and I don't mean that in a like that I didn't like her. It was painful to watch how selfless she was. And I
Yeah.
realized that I it was painful for me because what I realized is that she was reflecting back to me how I was for so long. I didn't believe enough in my own personality, and I didn't love myself enough to think that people could possibly like me just for being me. I felt like I had to sew buttons on for people like Naho does. I had to make lunges. I mean, this is just, figurative. I felt like if I'm doing things for other people, then they'll like me. I felt that they liked me because I could offer them something. Me being me by virtue of being me, I didn't believe was enough. And it's so funny because years later, I met up. I'm still friends with some of the friends that I was friends with in high school, but I've met up with other people and they've just been like, God, you were always so sweet and, funny. And we loved you. They loved me for who I was. It was completely my own insecurities that made me feel like I wasn't loved. So I found that very disheartening with Naho, and but toward the end, thankfully, she start learns to sort of put her foot down and stand up for herself. So it gets better, thank God. But I also that what you just mentioned, Josh, reminded me of this tendency we have to want to save people. And
Mhm.
I think that, we were talking about in the beginning about how, Rebecca, you're a counselor, I'm a life coach, wanting to help people. That's very different from wanting to save others because we don't think we're worthy of saving or able to save ourselves. Because I went through a very long period of that. Like if I'm really good to other people, if I save other people, maybe that, I don't know, maybe that's enough. But the person I really need to save was myself. And
Yeah.
then I would be able to save others. So I just like Anaho brought up a lot of that. I felt like she should have been looking at her own stuff, what her own needs were, and not focusing so much on what everybody else's needs were.
Yeah, absolutely. To me, um, looking at Naho, she seems like classic codependent. I don't know if
Yes.
you've read the book by Melody Beattie,
No.
um, called Codependent No More.
Okay. I'm gonna write that
Fantastic
down.
book. Yeah, you
Okay.
really should. It's great. It's staple in many classes
Okay.
to read about it. But yeah, because codependents want to control situations
Oh,
typically
yeah.
because they feel out of control themselves.
Yes.
And um and it's
Yeah.
usually they're very loving and caring individuals, but it's just like I need this to go my way and I need to control it, and it's not necessarily like a thought that's on the surface, but that's
Right.
what they're doing.
Yes. Yeah.
And I say that with all love and compassion because
Yeah.
I myself am a recovering codependent. So
I think I am too, based on what you're saying. Yeah. Not recovering,
yep.
but a codependent. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so that's what Naho, she seems like to me, that she was just trying to and all of them are trying to control this situation. And I know we're gonna get to Kakeru soon, but like all
Mhm.
of them are, yeah, like yeah, you gotta take care of yourself. Everybody is responsible for their own person. But also,
Exactly.
it's good to help others, obviously, too. But that's just what I wanted to
Absolutely.
tell all of them. Like,
Yeah, I know.
there's, yeah. Well, I'll have more to say when we talk about Kakaru, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, before we get to the friend group, let's go ahead and talk about Kakeru as an individual. So he's the transfer student, which for some reason in anime that's like a trope. It's like we have a new transfer student. He's the main character. She's the main character. As I of course she is, or they are, whatever. Um, but Kakeru, he is yeah, this is back to what you were saying, like, back in the 80s, like, everybody looks fine and happy on the outside,
Oh,
but what's the internal, the spiritual struggle that's going on
yeah.
inwardly? And we don't know that,
Mhm,
to the fullness yet. When we start out with episode one, as we
mhm,
get to when Murdoch's passed, his mother had died, and
mhm.
he's keeping that guilt and that shame.
Mhm.
and we uh, just like Naho has to learn, like she can't control, like, every action. She can't ultimately like save, Kaku. She can only, be there to encourage and help
Yeah.
them in some ways.
Mhm.
But the group of friends, and I love one of the best quotes in this entire series, in my opinion at least, is when um kind of it's like dragging this mat or something, and it's like a high school like gym mat and whatever, and those can be quite heavy depending on the size.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
um and he's dragging it around, and he's like, man, this is heavy, and they all come to him, and he's like, hey, sometimes
Mhm.
things are too heavy to carry alone.
Oh, yeah.
And
I wrote that down. Yeah, yeah.
I I
That
just
stuck out.
love that, and you can just see it's very symbolic when he just like lets go, and it makes me think of this verse in Psalm 55:22, where it says, "Cast your burden on the Lord, and He will sustain you. He will never allow the righteous to be moved."
Oh, love
So
that.
yeah, I thought that was really good. But yeah, can you give us a little insight to why something they carry so much like guilt for some of these actions or some of these outcomes when indirectly they didn't cause it?
Yeah. I his guilt really resonated with me. I always felt guilty about something. I had nothing to feel guilty about. It was my depression just wanting to always make me feel bad about something. Now, Cockatoo was feeling guilty about something very specific. I don't know if I had the exact same experience as he did. Um, I think that this might not be true, but I think that we tend to think that we are the center of the universe in the sense that, like, um, my mother committed suicide and, I didn't take her to the hospital. Therefore, it's all about me. Like, I must have, and especially at that age, I think it's logical to feel that way. Like, we might not have occurred to him that, you know what? Firstly, my mom was struggling with a mental health issue. Secondly, this, thirdly, this, fourthly, this. His mom had her own whole entire life, but I think that it's, um, logical that, somebody close to her would just take on that whole burden. um, so I think that that's sort of what happened, and he didn't. I mean, his grandmother was lovely, but I don't know if he really had somebody. His father had disappeared. He didn't have any siblings, so he didn't really have anybody to talk it through with. And I think that when you're sort of a transfer student, if you're a student in high school anyway, and especially a transfer student, I don't think the first day that you meet all your friends, you want to start talking about how guilty you feel and whatnot. So I think that it was just a classic example of him not having a support network.
Yeah,
Yeah, which is
He
ultimately what the kids became, his friend group.
exactly. Yeah.
Only in, well, and we'll get to this later, I'm sure, but only in the alternate universe,
That's it.
though, were they
Yeah.
able to be that solid support system. And in the
Exactly.
original one, they weren't able to be there. They were there,
Yeah.
but they didn't push really hard and say, "Hey, tell
Yeah.
us." They almost like strong armed him into saying something.
Exactly. That's exactly it, and that's I was thinking the whole time that the support that they're providing him is amazing, but if they hadn't had the benefit of receiving those letters and receiving essentially knowledge that they had 10 years later, they wouldn't have clued into all of those
oh yeah,
things.
most
Right.
definitely.
So, so it was they wouldn't have been as informed, and that's why I think that
Right.
we have to, as parents, be that 10 years later, like really
Yeah.
listen and, try to help your kids benefit from, your challenges, your struggles. But the thing is though, I al- I can't blame them because I hid my mental health issues so well. I was so good at hiding, and I think a lot of people are. So, I can't blame my friends for not cluing in and pushing me, like you said, tell us, because I was just putting on such like when people did find out that I had struggled with mental health, they're like, if anybody else had told me that except you, I would have believed them, but there's no way I would have suspected you. Deb, that you were struggling. We are very good at hiding our misery. So it was a combination of things, him being able to hide, I guess, what he was going through, and the kids just sort of being in their own world and not really thinking to probe, you know.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And like, yeah, they would not have had that insight.
Yeah.
And it was only because all of this is fueled by their regrets and by their
Yeah.
guilt
Yeah.
and wanting to change things. And
Yeah.
man, it was
Oh, no.
it's so difficult. And you're right. We're so good at
Mhm.
covering up
Mhm.
our deep stuff. Even
Mhm.
me, even me. I say that because apparently my face gives away everything that
I
I'm thinking and feeling.
That's
And
good.
Yeah, unlike me, you can't tell because I don't move my face.
that is true. I don't know. Yeah. I was like, Josh is never going to have wrinkles.
Yeah.
It's amazing. His mom is the same way. She doesn't like move her eyebrows very much. I don't it
Wow.
must be just like a hereditary thing. But I'm like,
Yeah.
wow,
Yeah,
you're gonna have flawless skin. It's gonna be
and
amazing.
because I'm trying to do their eyebrows, and I try. So
Nothing's happening.
no, if anything, I'm just lifting my ears up.
I was gonna say, is something moving?
Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah.
god.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, even me who I mean, apparently people know everything. It's people didn't catch on
Yeah.
to the deep, deep well of
Mm.
sorrow
Oh,
that's inside of you.
oh,
Like they might
exactly.
know, gosh, something's wrong. You're
Yeah.
sad.
Yeah.
But do they know that you're telling yourself that you hate yourself, that
Yeah.
no one will ever love you because you're fat?
Yeah.
No one will
Yeah.
ever like dark
Oh my god.
stuff.
Right, it's a lot
Horrible,
of
horrible
negativity,
things.
toxicity thoughts, and
Mhm.
they're the so speaking from a Christian spiritual standpoint, the enemy, I think, is the root of all negative thoughts and root of all evil, really, and he just creates and he takes that little thing that's rooted in truth and then just distorts it, and then that's how we believe the lies. Like, well, I mean, I am this way, so no one will ever love me or like me.
Mhm.
So I mean, yeah, I definitely understand, Becca, to your point.
Well, yeah, and
Yeah.
it makes me think too, even of as much as they tried to help and as much as they were being a good support system
Mhm.
Mhm.
in this alternate universe,
Mhm.
and they were kind of doing all the things right in a way.
Yeah.
Um, they couldn't stop that one moment where
Mm.
Kakeru found the cell phone and the message from his mom.
Yeah,
Mhm. Mhm.
It's either from his mom or to his mom, I forget.
Yeah.
And it sent him into a spiral, a
yeah,
downward
Yeah.
spiral.
Yeah.
There's no way that they could have stopped that,
Mhm.
and in this alternate reality, before he jumped out in front of the bus or the
Mhm.
truck,
Mhm.
he thought about them and their
Right.
their relationships, but as good as those relationships were at that moment, even in that alternate universe with everything
Mhm.
going right,
yeah,
Mhm. Mhm.
he could have just as easily not thought about that
yeah,
and
Mhm.
still done it anyway.
Yes.
And there's like, in a way, it's like someone's mental health struggle is their own,
mhm,
and you can't blame yourself for what happens to them.
Absolutely. That is something that, we can go and we can get support. And of course, I encourage everybody to do everything you can to prioritize your mental health. But the only person who can do the work is you.
Yep.
You can be helped. Like, that's something I realized. Like, there's just no greater truth. You can get the support, you can read books, you can exercise, you can do this and you can do that. But if you're not diligent about listening to those thoughts and and dealing with them right in that moment, they're just gonna, you know, you're just gonna ride off on their wave. And something I don't think I'll ever understand, maybe you guys understand, why is it so much easier to believe negative thoughts about ourselves than positive thoughts? Why? Like, I don't
Yeah.
get that. Why is that
I
our default?
It is though. It is.
Yeah.
It's
I
our
know.
default.
Is it
Negative is
societal? Is it I don't think it's innate. I don't think it's an animal
No,
thing.
I mean, I think it's,
no.
societal. I was watching a report or reading something, about how teens and kids specifically, with social media, they're already like depressed in a sad state, and they're
Yeah.
scrolling and looking through Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, Instagram,
Mhm.
um, and not to find hope necessarily, but find something to like feed that negativity in that dark place.
Yeah.
Um, so
Oh,
I thought that was very
yes.
interesting.
Mhm.
I'd like to touch on that if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I something that I learned about in coaching, as a coachee and a coach, is this thing that we call a self-fulfilling prophecy. We have these very subconscious, deeply held beliefs. We're not even aware that we have them. And I think that that we act about 95 or 85% based on our subconscious and 15% based on our conscious mind. So in other words, we mostly behave in the way that our subconscious tells us to behave. So if we have these negative images of ourselves in our subconscious, um, we are going to be constantly seeking situations that confirm those. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? Like it's like I'm ugly. Um, it's almost satisfying to be scrolling through Instagram and getting that reconfirmation, that confirmation that yes, that my belief is true. It's really hard to explain. I don't know if I explained it very well, but it's like when I grew up so sad and so miserable for 20, 30 years. All I ever brought was sadness and misery into my life because that's what I knew. That's what resonated. That's what fit my pattern. I didn't do it consciously. But whether I wanted to believe it or not, that was my comfort zone because all I had ever known was sadness. And anytime joy came along, it was almost like, whoa, what are you? I didn't know how to accept it. So I hope that made sense. I don't think I explained it very well, but my point is that we are looking again, it's like we want to be miserable for some reason. And I have no idea why. It's
Misery
much
loves
harder.
company, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the thing. It's yeah,
Definitely.
it reminds me again of codependency and
Mm,
this book by Melody Beattie. Beattie? I think that's her name. Anyway,
mm,
she talks about, talking with so she grew up in an alcoholic family.
mm,
Her dad or her mom, either one of them, one of her parents was an alcoholic, and later in life, she ended up becoming an alcoholic, and
mhm.
it's just this like cycle of
Yeah.
horrible,
Yeah.
sickness, really.
Yes.
Um, but she was saying, someone who grew up in an alcoholic family in a home like that,
Mhm.
a lot of times they will become codependent and try to
Yeah.
control situations because they feel like, well, they couldn't control their mom or their dad,
Mhm.
whatever happened in that situation, but they
Mhm.
end up falling in love with someone who is an alcoholic, and they're like, why every time, how does this happen? And it reminds me, just like you were saying, um we act on our subconscious, we act on
Yeah.
that for codependence, need of control. And
Yeah.
is there was one story in the book where they were saying, I can be looking at 100 different people in a room, and I will pick out the one person who is an alcoholic to fall in love with. Why? How does that happen?
Because
And
it's familiar. We will
yeah,
always choose the familiar. Um, and I wonder also if there's a sense of, okay, I couldn't save my mother, let's say, but maybe I can
mhm.
save this person.
Yeah, yeah,
I think there's a lot in
absolutely.
there that needs to be unpacked for sure,
Mm. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's
You'll
definitely
really
not
like the book
random.
if you read it.
Oh, I've already written it down. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
I'm
you really will.
excited.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Josh, I wanted to get back to something else you said earlier.
Yeah.
What was you read something from scripture about casting our load
Burdens,
or
yes. Psalm 55:22, casting Yeah, I'll read again. Cast your burdens, and this is from the Amplified translation. So, for those of you who read NIV and whatnot, this may differ in uh, certain verbiage that it uses. Um, Cast your burden on the Lord, and He will sustain you. He will
Mhm.
never allow the righteous to be moved.
Okay. That hit home because sometimes when I feel like you asked what I do for self-care, and sometimes I've tried everything and I'm still not feeling as good as I want to feel. And that's when I just say, God, or whatever you call God, um, I don't know what to do. I am asking you to take this and do something with it, and please like help me feel better. I guess that's it. I guess it's just a prayer, but I do think that, and he has never disappointed me, never. It always. I think it's really, I don't know, empowering or something to be able to recognize, you know what? I can't solve all this. I need to pass this to somebody who maybe knows what to do with it and maybe can do something about it. It's a very raw moment when you can do that. And so, yeah, that quote just reminded me of that. It's like there's always something bigger than you that you can just lean on, ask for help, and I personally believe that the help comes. At least that's been my experience.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, in the Bible it says, his promises are true, his word never returns void. So absolutely. And yeah, I think a lot of people have a hard time doing that who are
Mm-hmm.
believers or claim to be
Mm-hmm.
a Christian. And they um I think I heard somebody talking about it recently, saying, yeah, we're told to, and we say, hey, God will either leave you and, you know,
Mm-hmm.
um, help me with this. But in the next moment, we're like, man, I don't know how I'm gonna, how we're gonna get the
Mm-hmm.
mortgage this month. You get
Mm-hmm.
up,
Mm-hmm.
you get up, you get down to pray, and you get up, and suddenly, you work yourself physically sick that you need a tablet of
Mhm.
Tums or something.
Yes.
Um,
Or like me, a
Yeah.
tension headache for 11 days
Oh,
straight.
oh, that's
So,
that's brutal.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that what happens is, I mean, nobody's suggesting that, we stop working because God will pay our bills or anything like that.
right, yeah, yeah,
Right? Like
yeah,
we still,
yeah.
I think
Uh,
there was a story about the Blessed Virgin, anyway, about that when I can't remember what it was, but maybe I'll look it up. But about, you have to help yourself, but you can have the support of something greater than you. And I think that also is what we are talking about, naming. Like right now, my need is to somehow find extra money to pay my mortgage. I feel that also, like on a non spiritual level, but just a psychological level, just sort of putting that forward as a target, your subconscious starts working on it and it starts giving you ideas on how to work towards that. This is like visualization and manifestation. And you've probably read all about that stuff too. So I think it works on various levels, psychologically, spiritually. Well, those. Yeah.
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 It's so while we were talking about that, the verse from Psalms, it
Mhm.
made me think of Galatians 6, where Paul is talking to the Galatians,
Mhm.
um, and he says to bear one another's burdens and thereby fulfill the law of Christ.
Mm.
And I
Mhm.
just love that.
Yes.
Um, it goes on to say here, for if anyone thinks that he is something when he is nothing, he deceives himself. Verse 1 was talking about temptations and
Mhm.
basically bearing each other's burdens and temptations is what he's talking
Mhm.
about. But it goes for other situations too.
Mhm.
But then he says, but each one must examine his own work, and then he will have reason for boasting in regards to himself alone and not in regards to one another. For each
Mhm.
one will bear his own load.
Mhm.
So it's this idea of the bigger picture, the big stuff that
Exactly.
we help each other bear our
Yeah.
burdens. But
Mhm.
then there's also the daily things that
Mhm.
we
right.
need to bear our own load that we are
That's right.
responsible for. And
That's right.
so we all need each other and we're all responsible for ourselves as well. And
Exactly.
I think that sums it up perfectly.
Yeah, and I think it comes back to what you were saying about self-care. I mean, that
Yeah.
talks about, how am I supposed to solve my day-to-day problems if I'm not well? if I don't take care of myself, if I don't keep my vessel clean. Um, so yeah, I think essentially what it's saying is, you know, use any resource possible to get you to a state of peace. Whether that's digging inside, whether that's digging outside toward God, whether it's reaching your hand out and asking for help. It's help is everywhere. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, we are not alone. We are
No.
not alone, and that's what Kakeru ends up finding out in this
There you
alternate
go.
universe,
Yeah.
That's right.
is that
Yeah.
he is not alone. He did think about his friends right
Yeah.
before he considered jumping out
Yeah.
in front of that truck,
Yeah.
Yep.
and how it's cathartic to think that there's an alternate universe
Yeah.
um, where he
Yeah.
would have lived and what would that have been like.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we also can't stay in the what ifs. We have to
No.
enjoy our lives, as they are and move on. It reminds me of at the very end, I think it was in episode 13, where, I forgot his name with the glasses.
Oh, he's
Oh,
so cute. Oh, he had, yeah, I did write it
Hagida.
down.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
Oh,
think
yeah,
that's
yeah.
it. I think that's
Yeah.
Hagida. Where he was saying, he was like, well, it's not, even if we write these letters,
Yeah.
our reality, it
Right.
won't change, guys.
Yes,
Like, just so you
exactly.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was like,
Yeah.
yeah, you're right. It won't change. But it was like, well, perhaps it's somewhere out there in the universe
Yep.
that he is alive and that we could have saved him.
Yep.
And so yeah, and gosh, and even oh, now I forgot. I only remember like the main characters' names.
I know, me too. And
Who are
Suwa.
you thinking of?
The tall guy who loves
Suwa.
soccer.
Oh, Sua.
Sua,
Yeah.
yes,
Suwa,
Yeah.
yes.
yeah,
Soccer.
yeah.
He even says, he's in love with Naho
I know.
Yeah.
at the time.
A
And
side note on that too.
Yeah.
He's a true friend
oh
and
my gosh,
Mel's being
yes.
a true bro because
Yes.
Yeah.
he he's putting his feelings. He's
Yep.
putting Kakuto's feelings
Yeah.
ahead of his own,
Yeah,
Mhm.
he's
and
incredible.
Naho's feelings ahead of his own too.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
like he even makes a point to say at towards the end that
Oh yeah.
he's like, well, somewhere out there in the universe, 10 years in
Yeah.
the future, me is
Mhm.
living the dream. He's married to
Yeah,
Naho. He's got a
Yeah.
kid.
exactly.
And you know what? I can give up on that for them to be happy and for Kakeru to be alive.
Yeah.
And it was like, gosh,
I know that
so
was
sad.
so it was so
Oh,
moving. I think that he realized that, the reality that I'm staying in is the one where I do end up marrying Naho and having a family with her.
Yeah.
And he was able to grasp the concept that this parallel universe where they save Kakadu um, is happening in parallel. It's a different story. Yeah, I love the idea of parallel universes. That's probably a whole other episode.
Yeah,
But
yeah. I mean, we could
I
there's a
love it.
lot that we could like delve into
Yeah.
on that.
Oh, yeah.
But for time's sake, I
Yeah.
think we've had a really good discussion. Again,
yeah.
Dad,
Oh, me too.
it's been such a pleasure having
Oh,
you on
thank
the
you.
show, you know,
Thank you.
and even though um we may have different, beliefs and ideologies about, faith and what we
Mhm.
do, we can still come together, have the conversation about, a
Yeah,
topic that we believe is, very important.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
thank you so much for just, sharing with us all that you
Oh,
had today.
thank
Um,
Yeah,
you.
it's been
Thank
wonderful.
you.
I've loved the conversation,
Oh, thank
honestly.
you
So
guys. Thank you so much. I don't want it to end.
I
I
know,
do.
I
we
know.
could keep going.
I know. There's so much. Yeah,
Yeah.
I can't thank you enough for finding me and having me on. Honestly, I just feel truly blessed right now. Thank you so, so much.
Well, I mean that's one of the things that we like to do on this podcast. We want to, edify, others while also, edifying, he who made us,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and just, for that encouragement because I mean I feel that's really needed, right now,
Oh, yeah.
um, but in relation to where people can find you and they want to, keep up with you, where can they find you?
Thank you. The best place is Instagram, Debra Nute. I'm not sure if you're going to write my name in the show notes or something, but anyway, it's
Yes, yes.
okay. All right. So it's Instagram, Debra Nute. That's the best way to follow me, I guess. And if you want to check out our podcast, it's Today We Laughed and Learned, and you can find that wherever you stream your podcasts. Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you so much, Deb. Well, until next time, everybody, keep those halos shiny and stay all in, my friends. See you next time.
Thank you. Bye.